Hello and welcome to the Fossil Huntress podcast. Today on the show we're going to talk about plate tectonics. So that is the science of studying the Earth's outer layer, which is made of large moving pieces called plates, and all of the Earth's water and land sit upon these. So they create the structure of the world we know today. So when you look at Europe and Asia and North and South America, you're looking at the plates that have pushed and risen up to form continents and mountains, but they also rub up against one another below the seas and our oceans. So they cover our Earth and they shape our Earth. So we'll talk about those today. One of the most useful analogies for picturing the Earth and the many layers that make her up is a boiled egg. So if you think of an egg as sort of the egg yolk as the core center, and then the white as the mantle, and then the outside edge that makes up all the plates, that if you were to lightly tap it with the back end of a butter knife, you'd break it up a little bit, hopefully in some nice big sheets that could slide under one another and brush up against each other and create some ridging and some mountains. This is probably the best analogy. So the Earth is layered much like an egg. So the shell and the white and the yolk, the eggshell we walk around is the rigid lithosphere, which literally means rock sphere. So it varies in thickness from almost nothing to about 150 kilometers. And in places where we're near volcanics or volcanic chains or mid-ocean ridges where the rocks are hot and they become hot and weak, the lithosphere is quite thin. But on the places of the Earth where the rocks are relatively cold and strong, particularly where they're below the plains of the continental interior, the lithosphere is thick and quite strong. So the lithosphere includes the continental crust, which is mainly made up of light, silica-rich granitic rocks and some oceanic crust. And these consist of basalt, which is a heavy, dark sort of volcanic rock. And then the uppermost ridge, the part of the underlying mantle, is made up of very heavy, dark rock, which is low in silica and high in iron and a bit of magnesium. And we see this where the rock is thicker and colder. So we don't always see it. So picture the outside edge of an egg, and that in some parts there's a thicker layer, a thicker, darker layer, and that would be that heavy silica, iron, and magnesium bit. Beneath that lithosphere or outer kind of egg crust or eggshell coating is our mantle, which we think of as the egg white. So even if it's boiled, it's a boiled egg in your analogy, that egg white is still a little bit soft, but let's think of it as unboiled and a bit more viscous. So we can think of the mantle as a bit plastic, a bit movable. So it's more solid in some areas and more viscous and movable in others. And it coats that egg yolk. So at the center of our Earth is an outer core and an inner core. And these are probably mostly made of iron. So that very center bit is quite solid. And then the outer core is more liquid. And then upon all of these, so the temperature raises and lowers. Picture a pot of boiling soup. And so as things get hotter and thinner, things move about and we stir them in the mantle. And then these are reflected in the outer plate tectonics, which I mentioned move about 2 to 4 inches a year. So not a huge amount, but the impact on the Earth and the shape of the world we see today is hugely influenced by these. Like a cracked eggshell, much of the lithosphere is not continuous. So the Earth's surface is broken into many bits and pieces, some big and some small, so about 7 big pieces and several smaller pieces, and we refer to these as tectonic plates. So the Pacific plate is enormous and it underlies most of the Pacific Ocean. And then we have plates like the North American plate, which contains a little bit of oceanic and some continental crust. The western part of the plate is the North American continent, and the eastern part is the floor of the northwestern Atlantic Ocean. So sometimes we see them raised above land, and sometimes they're below the oceans. So we don't see their movement so much, but we feel them when two plates collide or push up against one another. We experience these as volcanics or seismic eruptions in the earth. So we feel them as vibration when the one shifts below the other. And the consequence of that is that we feel the vibration in the rest of the earth, sort of like ringing a bell, as it were. So the plates move about continuously, so they're moving ongoing. And the earth is moving ongoing, much like a convection oven, because the earth is continuously losing heat. So that the heat rises through the oceanic floors, and then it comes from the mantle, which is sort of that mid-layer piece. It's lost through the ocean to the seawater, and then it comes up into the atmosphere, and ultimately we lose that heat to space. And because of that kind of continuous circular cycle of that convection oven piece, the earth is perpetually in motion. So I'm going to do a larger blog post on plate tectonics. And for Jeffrey, who asked this question, you didn't tell me what level of schoolwork this was for, so I'm sure I've raised more questions than I've answered, but I'll send you a couple of links so that you can read more about this. But essentially, the earth is like an egg. Picture it sliced in half, and the outer shell is the place that you and I experience. That's the place of the continents and the oceanic plates moving about. Underneath that is the mantle, sort of the egg white or that viscous piece that's perpetually in motion as well. And then the center core is the inner and outer core is our egg yolk. And that outer core is more viscous or liquid. The inner core is more solid. And all of it is producing heat and moving about on an ongoing basis. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I'll delve deeper into this in a podcast or in a blog post, but perhaps in a future podcast as well. And I hope you guys are all doing well. Take care.